Hello, welcome to the Family Values Podcast. My name's Joe Woods.
My name's Tom Hicks.
So last week, which was our first official episode, sort of post-demo, it was fun. It was a nice break from, generally talking about Brexit, whether we're talking about in the confines of this podcast or in general life. But it was nice to have a political discussion, or at least a local government discussion on something that doesn't revolve around fucking Brexit.
Yeah. I think it was a good time to do it as well, considering as the negotiations have sort of almost restarted a little bit, and we'll get into it a little bit back at that later in the podcast. But now we don't really know what's going on, so moving to shifting the spotlight back onto local issues, if not just for 1 week, was a nice palate cleanser.
Yeah, it was just like a nice thread just to sort of follow throughout the discussion, just because it meant we didn't have to jump back and forward from different topics. It had a nice natural flow to it, and yeah, there was a lot of research that went into it beforehand, and it had a certain, we weren't scripted, but we had we had timed sort of topics to sort of stick to, but it had a nice natural flow to it, still. There is something I want to carry on from last week, which we discussed a lot about Thurrock. Thurrock is the immediate borough of Essex you come into when you come directly out of the east of London from the boroughs of Havering, Barking and Dagenham. It's Thames side. There's a lot of old industry there. There's a lot of it's where the current quote unquote port of London is, even though it's not in London. There's been discussions for years about, particularly amongst sort of London historians, philosophers, and even infrastructure and transport experts, that Thurrock, the Essex borough of Thurrock, and the Kent borough of Dartford, which is very similar to Thurrock in a lot of ways, could potentially become part of London for matters of overspill and needing the infrastructure and space to build more housing and cheaper housing.
For a little bit of background for people who might not be associated with how London has expanded, I can't remember the exact year, but in the 60s there was sort of a cut-off point where 1965, where the Greater London Authority at the time basically said, we're not going to expand anymore, and there was an act in Parliament to say, this is London, this will always be London, because we don't want for London to become a city like Tokyo, where it just sprawls and sprawls.
So there's a thing called the Green Belt that surrounds the immediate sort of boundary of London, of Greater London, that was obviously came in with the Greater London Authority Act. It's called the Green Belt. It's a few miles stretch of land going in each direction that basically has very limited amount of building work that's actually allowed to take place on it. And this has allowed places like Epping Forest on the outskirts of London to basically stay intact. It has allowed, if you look down in the kind of the marshways that exist along the River Thames, out in places like Rainham, they're still surviving to this day. You've got the Marshland Nature Park out there. It looks like we're going to have to start building into the green belt soon. We may have to get rid of it.
Unfortunately, it's the housing situation in London. I mean, we don't live in central London, and we are still paying exorbitant amounts of rent. Whenever we mention how much we pay in rent to anybody living outside of London, their face looks like you.
Because I know what you roughly pay for this flat here, and it's a one bedroom. It's a nice flat, but it's a 1 bedroom flat in South Woodford. You pay essentially. You'd pay in 1 month what someone from the likes of somewhere up north, maybe like even Manchester, would pay for 2 months.
Yeah, I mean this 1 bedroom flat, I looked it up on one of the sites when I moved here. I think it was Zoopla. It's estimated to be £350,000 in its worth. And I was up in Leeds this weekend, and I saw similar flats on sale for less than £100,000. So it's literally more than 3 times the price.
Jesus Christ.
So even though we love the green belt, and one of the things that I particularly love about London is the fact that we do have these green spaces on the outer edges. We unfortunately have to admit to ourselves that we do have to build on it, and we do have to allow more places to have houses, because it's not stopping. People are not going to stop moving to London.
I mean, I personally think, and someone who might be from further, or from actual East London as opposed to where we are, which is North East London, and kind of more connected to Epping Forest and going further up the Lee Valley, someone who's actually from the actual east, so Havering out into Thurrock, might say we're being biased here by me saying that I totally understand why Thurrock should be maybe brought into the fold, would be like I said last week, maybe officially as an actual borough of London, because it's, despite how huge it is, it's quite a big borough of Essex, and or two, even just having an agreement, staying part of Essex, but having an agreement with the GOA that the GOA could build infrastructure into the borough, whether it be housing, social housing, transport infrastructure, anything to help ease the problems in London. And the same goes, I think, for South London, South East London with Dartford. Dartford's a very similar area. It's basically just outflow of London. It's kind of half rural, but it's mainly just London outspill, and it's the natural development that would happen there has just been hampered by the Greenbelt, and is, you know, the London housing crisis is just being choked by it, or has been exacerbated by it.
And if they don't do something soon about this, the London housing crisis is going to start putting up rent and putting up house prices outside of this area. So if I think what you suggested there is some sort of agreement, would probably be the best of both worlds, because it's sort of my opinion that they won't go for it, as it were. The local residents probably won't want to be part of it.
Local residents, despite the fact they're just outside the border, or just over the border from London, they're equally as anti-London as anyone from up north. Mm-hmm. There's a real culture, particularly in that kind of part of Essex, of just London hatred, even though literally they're not part of the county of London, so they're not part of London technically, but they are part of the London orbit, I suppose. You couldn't call them part of the London bubble. They're not that mindset. No. They're probably the opposite of that mindset, but that's why they wouldn't take kindly to being called part of London. I'm from South Chingford, but I'm from Chingford, and I live in the more kind of Labour, more urbanly developed part of Chingford. But Chingford, which has been part of London since 1965, you have older people there who will not accept it's part of London. To them, it's Essex. It's culturally Essex. They do not want to be part of London.
Well, it's such a shock for anyone sort of our age who sort of looks at it and sort of says, well, it looks like London, it feels like London, it's got London Borough of Waltham Forest everywhere. Yeah. And that's where you're going to get the pushback from places in Dartford and Thurrock, because they're just not going to be part of that. A lot of the people who moved to Thurrock had dads and granddads who specifically moved out of London for that exact reason. They didn't like what London was becoming in the 70s and 80s.
Yes, I mean, for rights or wrongs, I suppose it's just natural. We call it white flight. It was, it's kind of phenomena that happens with most big kind of Western cities.
Yeah, it's a term that did originate in the States, but as being applicable to London, it's undeniable that it's a similar trend.
Yeah, I mean, very similar. I mean, those, particularly some of those very urbanly developed yet poor boroughs of outer London we were talking about last week, Newham, for example. I mean, there isn't much of what you call a tradition. Some people would call a traditional London population anymore. I mean, it's very much, it's a transient population. It's it's people from immigrant backgrounds, or it's people. You're starting to see a few more kind of slightly more younger, what you call quote unquote professionals, or as I call them, hipsters, but not really. They kind of seem to be dipping their toe into East Ham a bit and then jumping back out.
Yes, but they're almost the opposite type of person from England, at least, that you would consider being a Cockney, as it were. They are from all over the country and from all over the world, but at the same time have a very, very metropolitan, cosmopolitan outlook in the world.
I always say this to Pete, like, if you're actually from London and your family is originally from London, you'd never refer to yourself as a Londoner. The only people that call themselves Londoners are the people who are not originally from London. Because one, we're human, and we're tribal. We kind of we identify with the immediate area we're from. Yeah. And London is so vast and huge. I mean, it's a city the size of Chechnya, the Chechen Republic. It's 50 miles across, 70 miles across, 50 miles horizontally. Yeah. So.
And to bring it back to the comparison to different areas of the country, as I just mentioned, I was in Leeds this week, and they had a few chants of Yorkshire, because they're obviously, rightfully, very proud of being from Yorkshire. But Yorkshire is geographically a very wide area, whereas the chants in London are East London, or South and North, and respectively, particularly when you divide it up into the four quadrants.
But this is how fucking tribal human beings are, and this is how spaced out London is, how big of an area it is. People from East London can recognise someone from South East London because they have a different accent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Specifically South East London.
Yeah, and it's only 10 miles away.
Yeah. And, well, not even that. I mean, they're separated. If you were standing in Canning Town, if you were looking across at, what's the opposite side, I suppose, Charlton or Deptford, was it a mile across at most,
I suppose,
if that? Yeah. So, but I suppose you're separated by a river, and we can tell the difference between each other's accents, and we hate each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just shitty human tribalism, I suppose, that obviously, particularly that in regards to this Dartford-Thurrock situation, that would ever prevent it becoming an official part of London. But hey, maybe sneak it in by the back door. Maybe some agreements, sort of infrastructure and transport agreements. I'll be up for that.
No, I think that would be good. I think there would have to definitely be a compensation to the boroughs, but that could work out good for everybody, I would say, and then it would ensure that the house prices and rent prices in those boroughs don't spiral out of control. Because if you wait until then, people are just going to have to move more far out of field, and it's going to hit the lowest income people.
Somewhere like Thurrock, Dartford as well, but Thurrock is such a vast area of land in terms of like an Essex borough that, I mean, you could just build for years and you could not make a dent in regards to green space, brownfield, any kind of open space that you want to hold on to. You could literally just make it a large suburban borough, and you could be somewhere like Havering, which is the most outer East London borough, and we didn't really discuss last week, and I don't know why, it is kind of, everything about it is suburban. There's no great large urban development with the exception of the Middle Romford town, which is the centre of the borough of Havering, but it's just everything about it is absolutely suburban. There's a lot of greenery, open spaces, and I suppose you could just develop Thurrock like that. Yeah. You could still keep the countryside element, but you just need to develop cheaper housing. Yeah. Prefabs maybe, who knows?
I think there's a lot of, as you say, a lot of space there, but it's more the political angle which is going to be the hardest part, trying to, and going straight in for the jugular of you're effectively annexing those two boroughs.
Yeah, you're not going to win over what is a very reactionary right-wing part of the UK into part of London. It's not going to happen. Interestingly enough, a few years ago, I think it was the leader of Thurrock Council, you can actually look this up online, refused and went mental with the idea that Thurrock, Newham, and it was another East London borough would have to share the same premises as HQs on a sort of a cost-cutting venture, because the council workers from Thurrock would not be used to working with black people from Newham. It's literally what he said.
That's wow. That's something that if you say as a Londoner is a fireable offence a lot of the time. If you were to say an internal sort of company sort of thing,
as the leader of a council, I don't see. It's not exactly acceptable.
No,
I don't know.
No, it's not. It's difficult to fire a person like that. There must be some type of impeachment sort of proceedings, but I'm unfamiliar with how it would go about. But he probably kept the job.
I'm not embellishing that in any way. Absolutely true. I think this was probably about 5 years ago. But yeah, the county council leader of the borough council leader of Thurrock literally said it is not a good idea to have Thurrock Borough Council, Newham Borough Council, and someone else, maybe Havering, I think, working out of the same office building because they'll not be used to working with black people.
It's crazy because you sort of think the natural response to that is, well, shouldn't the people that work in the council be used to working with black people and actually want to do that, because there are black people in Thurrock?
Yeah.
So if you're afraid to work with black people, how can you actually represent the interests of the people that actually live in your borough? It's crazy.
I think we're going to move on to something else, just because I can literally go on about this topic forever in regards to the outflow of London, further urban development, or just development into the current home county boroughs. But let's touch on something that happened last weekend, just because we didn't get a chance to discuss it, because we had the one issue episode last week. Owen Jones, the Guardian's favourite twink, was beaten up outside a pub in Islington. I think with some friends and his boyfriend. Mm-hmm. Naturally, I think we're kind of suspecting it might be some kind of right-wing attack.
I'd be very surprised if the people that beat him up voted Remain or have voted Labour in their life.
And don't get too excited that I said right-wing attack. I'm not accusing moderate right-wing people of going out and attacking gay left-wing people. That's not what I'm saying. Some kind of militant, no, I don't want to say militant group, some kind of hardline group obviously may have took part in this. Or maybe just some thugs. Who knows?
Yeah.
What do we know about the situation?
Well, it was at 3 o'clock in the morning. As I think you mentioned, it was his 31st birthday, so it should be a happy occasion. It was an occasion to forget the in and outs of political life, of work life, as one of the same for Mr. Jones.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he was beaten up in a sort of... Well, it's one of those things where it could be a right-wing attack, it could be an out-and-out homophobic attack, because unfortunately the police haven't been able to catch these people, so we are speculating on their motives, although we can definitely rule out a few things, as it were. It probably wasn't any religious extremisms, because they like to make known when it was like that. I would suspect it is more of a... it was definitely a planned attack because they had to know where he was going to be at that specific time. So these people must be organised, and it wasn't just a case of a load of pissheads saw Owen Jones and wanted to be him.
What I'm wondering is if they'd just seen him in the pub beforehand, knew who he is, because I suppose there's a lot of people who would know who Owen Jones is, and then plan to attack him afterwards, or if they just knew his footsteps and knew where he would be.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's hard to say, but... You would imagine, because my understanding is that as soon as he came out the pub, he went for it. The guys went for it. It's disgusting. It's one of those things where you're like, particularly as somebody who vehemently disagrees with Owen Jones's politics on a lot of things, I just hate to see anybody from any political background, anybody who's outspoken and controversial like Owen is, to be beaten up like that, because it doesn't matter what your opinion is, it just matters that you actually have this violence now in our society, which seems to be becoming more common, unfortunately.
I mean, it harkens, and I don't want to do this, I never want to pull out the Nazi and 1930s comparisons, but if you're attacking political thinkers and journalists on the street, I mean, you're turning to 1930s Berlin, I'm sorry, you're going kind of Night of the Long Knives kind of direction. I mean, we can't...
Yeah, brown shirt sort of direction. That's what the brown shirts were. They would just go around and beating people who disagreed with them up just for the sake of it, just to scare them off. They were sort of, not state-sponsored at the beginning, but they became state-sponsored terrorists, effectively.
And effectively, there's going to be... I'm surprised, actually, how kind of... It wasn't little coverage, it was definitely reported on, but I'm surprised this is still not a talking point, because you'd think... Normally, after an event like this, it will go on for a little while, particularly if a left-wing or a gay guy would be attacked. The media would definitely, run with it for a little bit. But no, I suppose it was reported about for about a day. Yeah,
and it's sort of, particularly in the summer when there's not a lot going on. And
silly season, as they call it.
Yeah, silly season where everyone and the journalists are on holiday and no one is really paying attention. When you actually have something like this, which is a big deal. Any journalist being attacked, particularly a prominent one like this, should be more of a bigger deal, as opposed to the 24-hour news cycle that we're in at the moment, where it was just almost ignored. From my understanding, there was pretty much no coverage of it in the States, which again I found odd.
But is Owen Jones a known figure in the States? Is there any reason to report it in the States?
He's not a known figure, but this would be something that I would think would go very well with the narrative that the West in general, particularly the right wing of the West, is becoming a more violent entity. Which has been a talking point of the left ever since particularly Trump came to power.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that it didn't actually get more coverage, as I say, which is odd.
Yeah, because you'd imagine you'd be running there'd be journalists and news sites and news outlets running with these kind of think pieces, about how is the right wing becoming militant, is it becoming violent? And there has been these think pieces and there has been these strain of thoughts, but honestly, they're just really wasn't picked up and run with on this story.
No, and I don't know if it, but something to do with the fact that there was a lot of activity in Portland last week, literally on the same day, in regards to Antifa, who had their own sort of.
While we've got a few minutes, do explain that, because I keep hearing about Portland, and I to be honest, I've been really turned off by it. The American quote-unquote culture war side of things, just because in reality it's just fringe arseholes attacking each other.
That's pretty much the summary, yeah. But for a little bit more detail, there are two groups that were at the heart of this, and that was the Proud Boys and Rose City Antifa.
Big surprise.
Yeah. And the Proud Boys were started by Gavin McGuinness, who actually was a founder of Vice News, although he's a right-wing talking head these days. But the Proud Boys had a couple hundred people come in. They did a prayer, they sang the national anthem, they waved American flags, and then they just buggered off to the bar.
Yeah.
But quite literally hundreds, but knocking on 1,000 Antifa sort of showed up, and any stragglers that were sort of going around in Proud Boys uniforms or waving American flags or wearing MAGA hat, they just beat the living crap out of. There's a very harrowing video of two people, one's a teenage girl and her dad, and there's literally 100 people shouting at them to go away, and then they start running away, and they just start chasing them up a highway, effectively, with oncoming traffic. And so you've got this sort of reaction to the Proud Boys, who are not a nice group. They're definitely borderline racist, if not have some out and out white nationalists in them.
Yeah.
But the reaction Antifa have given is basically been to fight violence with violence, which is not the way that we should act in Western democracy.
Well, these fringe groups always exist, and they're always trying. They will always meet each other in these kind of confrontations and have these kind of, particularly in the realm of American Antifa and Proud Boys setup. They're not real fights. I mean, you've said it before. They're LARPing. They're play fighting. Yeah,
that's live action role playing, effectively.
They're effectively. They might be turning up with weapons. They might be knocking each other over the head with a metal pole. None of them know how to fight.
No.
I mean, comedian turned podcaster Joe Rogan said himself. I mean, you can look at the fighting techniques. We know this about Antifa. I don't want to. I'm sorry to follow the stereotype, but I just know a lot of people involved with the anti-fascist groups, and most of them are not fighters. They're not people who are used to fighting. They didn't grow up fighting. They were nerdy growing up. They're academics. They're generally well educated. They're just not people who grew up fighting. In the British context of things, on the other side, on the right wing, there's sort of the reactionary, but the hard right. They're normally the quote unquote street marchers of the right in the UK, and normally are thugs. They're normally guys involved from up north usually, or from the home counties involved in like football hooliganism. A lot of them, they're all criminals. They're just brawlers.
Yeah, there are guys who are looking for a fight, and they've found organisations like the EDL who are basically now a vehicle for them to go out and beat people that they don't like.
These are thugs who, they know how to fight.
Yes,
they know how to really dirtily beat the fuck out of someone. Mm-hmm. The Proud Boys, which is kind of, I suppose, the American equivalent, is not the same.
No, they're a lot more LARPers. They're big guys, and they're all gun nuts, but I don't think that many of them have the organisational skills. Like if there was a fight between the Proud Boys and the EDL, it wouldn't really be a contest.
I mean, the EDL, to be fair, don't have the organisational skills. You ever watch the EDL march through a town? They just wander around coked up and drunk, side to side. But by that same token, I'd probably say the Proud Boys are probably a bit better organised, but I ain't saying much against the EDL.
They're a bit smarter, because they, as I said before, they didn't actually cause a lot of trouble. They were basically there to get the reaction from Antifa that they wanted.
As much as I don't like the Proud Boys, I would definitely say though the Proud Boys are just definitely more disaffected, somewhat intelligent young men. Who have happened just to follow this stupid cause, which kind of makes no sense.
Yeah, and they will go to the I think one of the intels which will actually really backfire on particularly Antifa is the fact that one of the Proud Boys' main thing is free speech, where they have some horrible opinions, but in America in particular, it is an inalienable right that they have free speech, whereas one of the core tenets of Antifa is that free speech is not actually a good idea.
Well, I mean, look, to be fair to Antifa, they claim to be, communists, and fair enough. I mean, communism is part of authoritarianism. You believe, What comes with authoritarianism is lack of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
So
exactly, particularly lack of freedom of speech for people that they don't agree with. And they're at least being honest about it, I suppose.
At least they're being honest about it. Where, to be fair, someone like the Proud Boys, who they don't, at least for the most part, they don't openly subscribe to being fascists. So they just say they believe in freedom of speech. And to be fair, they do lapse on that. They tend to be equally as bad as Antifa in regards to shutting down conversation they don't like. Gavin McGuinness, who's the founder of the Proud Boys, is equally as bad.
Well, it's the sort of thing of shaming and of making it seem like for anybody who disagrees with you is at least un-American, or if not, just out and out evil. And that is something which the American right has been suffering with for a long time, and it seems to have gotten worse in the last few years, where people just want to put their fingers in the air and say, I don't want to listen to any of you SJW arseholes because you're just wrong about things, whereas really America was founded on the idea of listening to people. It's not just freedom of speech, it's also the freedom to hear other ideas and to take that into consideration.
I just don't. In all honesty, Antifa, you know what they're trying to achieve, technically on paper, but you know there's no way of achieving it. I just don't know what the Proud Boys' motive is.
I just think it's to troll. I think it's to try and expose Antifa for what they actually are.
Yeah.
But they're just doing it in a way which has attracted a load of unsavoury types to the organisation at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is not a smart move, and I would rather that people sat down and logically dismantled them through articles in newspapers and whatnot, rather than going out into the streets and shouting at them, because that's just going to escalate things in a not a very good way.
Going to move on to a topic that kind of started last week, maybe even week before, but I suppose we're still talking about. It's the prospect of a unitary government. What's the term I'm looking for?
Government of national unity.
Government of national unity.
It's definitely an Alistair Campbell line.
Yes. Oh, God. Don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against Campbell, but he always just comes across as a bit slimy. Point being, we're talking about the prospect of a government of national unity led by Corbyn, or really led by McDonnell. Let's be fucking, clear about that. John McDonnell was tried claiming that himself and Jeremy Corbyn has gone to 2 different courts to try and push through that if there's no confidence vote in a Boris Johnson government, automatically Corbyn will become a leader of a government of government of unity. And both courts have said, No.
And it doesn't take a legal expert to see why, because nowhere in the Fixed Term Parliament Act, which is the constitutional sort of justification that Corbyn is giving for his I don't like the term coup, but it's basically a takeover.
Right, okay. I mean, this is where my kind of analogies in regards to kind of 1940s communism is going to come in. I mean, the idea that automatically Corbyn would become the leader of a unitary government without any kind of vote, it just shows he's an authoritarian.
Yeah.
That is his chain of thought, the same with McDonnell. There is no difference in kind of the chain of thought between what we call old Labour, so the kind of old crusty socialists of Labour, so Corbyn, McDonnell, certain other members.
People who would describe themselves as Bennites.
Yeah. People who have been suspected to have collaborated with some of the Warsaw Pact governments during the 20th century, i.e., Corbyn's supposed to have tried to, have had meetings with the Czechoslovak special forces to basically give them they wanted information off of him, but apparently he didn't have the information. I can believe that. He was only an MP at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of MPs would have shared information with Jeremy Corbyn, especially when he was on the backbenches.
Yeah, I mean, Corbyn was a backbench warrior for decades. The point being is you can see that McDonnell and Corbyn's thought pattern falls in line with that of communist regimes. They want to automatically become the heads of state without a democratic vote. There'd be a forced vote of no confidence on Johnson, and they all of a sudden, it's 1940s Poland. The Communist Party have led a coup, backed by the Kremlin. and somehow without a democratic mandate of now rule Poland.
Exactly. And it doesn't actually say anywhere in the Fixed Term Parliament Act that the leader of the opposition is the first person who gets to form a government. It says if anyone can form a government. It's very open-ended, effectively, which is why you've had from the Lib Dems suggesting people like Ken Clarke or Harriet Harman, because they reckon that they're more palatable to Tory rebels, the SNP. I think the SNP have actually backed the Corbyn idea. But maybe that's just because they know it's not going to happen.
Well, no, it's not going to happen, but also the SNP, let's be fair, Corbyn probably has somewhat amount of sympathy with Scottish separatism. So...
so he's very much a regionalist, as it were, wanting to give more power to which is something I actually agree with.
I think it goes beyond that. If I'm correct, I think Corbyn does believe in Scottish independence the same as he believes in, Irish unity, reunification or unification, because let's be fair, Ireland was never an independent state, a full independent state before 1920 odd. But the SNP I think back him because of that.
They reckon that it'll probably get a more likely a referendum under a Corbyn administration than it would under a Bronson administration, you reckon?
A Bronson. Yes. I'm not going to attempt to do a fucking Charles Bronson impersonation, as much as I'd love to.
Try and do one combined Charles Bronson and Boris Johnson impersonation.
Now I actually just want to see Boris Johnson in a remake of Death Wish. I hate rich cunts.
And get on someone who's good at deep fakes to make that up, please.
That'd be amazing. But the point being, I don't know what Corbyn and McDonnell are playing at. Well, we know what they're playing at, and it's going to fall flat on their face. The reality is, if there was any kind of government of unitary government, there's definitely more chance of Ken Clarke taking over. I still don't see that, because that would be way too divisive.
I think you're right. I think it's more likely to get backs from Tory rebels, but I don't think you'll actually get the support within Labour to get enough people to back Ken Clarke. Even if he resigns the whip, he's still a very an establishment Tory figure. And to basically go back to your constituents and say, I voted for Ken Clarke to be Prime Minister, I don't think that a lot of people.
Can you think of a Tory politician currently more hated particularly amongst the Brexit voting population than Ken Clarke?
No. Rory Stewart might have a Murray, but I think more people. I think there's a sort of weird thing about Rory Stewart with a lot of Conservatives, where we sort of recognise that he has got a lot of talent and a lot of potential, and he may be a Prime Minister one day. He could actually be quite a good unifying Prime Minister, because he is quite in the centre, but he's not the right man.
Can I just say, in every way, Rory Stewart and Blair are the same person?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Away from politics, because definitely Stewart is of the more... He's of the more moderate kind of centre of the road Tory, just generally, as I call it, a city autistic. He's just obsessed with the city and with kind of easing restrictions on the city and on business. He's definitely very much a social liberal. He's very much for free trade. He's very much for the EU. And also, he just looks and sounds like Blair.
Yeah, he sort of looks like a bit more dishevelled.
He's a dishevelled Blair.
Yeah.
He hasn't got the gravitas of Blair. I think he's
Not yet, but he is still quite young. I think give him another decade when he's a bit more in the public eye and that he can do it. Yeah. As I say, I think he actually did a very, very good...
This is coming from someone who does like Rory Stewart.
Yeah.
As, a Lib Dems supporter, I actually like Stewart. I think, he really should be the leader of the Lib Dems. I'm not going to go into my thoughts on Swinson, but... Really, I think the party is wasting a talent.
He really has sort of drawn the short straw, whereas this is the time. If he had been around 10 years ago, being the same age, he could have definitely given David Cameron a run for their money, because David Cameron was sort of in the sort of same vein of him, or a little bit more traditional Tory.
Yeah, I'd say Cameron was definitely more traditional Tory. As liberal as Cameron is, I would definitely say Stewart's definitely at the softest end of the Tory party.
Yes, definitely.
He's definitely on the left of the Tory party. And there's a lot of people in the Tory party on the left of the Tory party, but he's definitely the one, I'd say, with... I wouldn't say he's definitely got clout, but because the party at the moment's run by the ERG, essentially... he's going to be in no position of power.
Until Brexit is sorted out one way or the other, Rory Stewart will never become close to be Prime Minister. He might not even get a cabinet position, quite frankly. Boris Johnson would never give him one because it would just be a signal to the Brexit voter population that he was too soft with them on. So.
But who do you see actually being the most likely candidate in the case of a unitary government, government of unity? Which, by the way, I don't see because I don't actually see Johnson losing a no confidence vote, at least from his own party.
No, honestly, I think the only way, and I do think this is extremely unlikely, but I can't see there being the Labour support for Clark. The only way that they're going to get that is if Jeremy Corbyn resigns and Harriet Harman takes over. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah,
not in a million years.
It's not going to happen because Labour's way too far gone down the road now. Momentum.
They're so close to number 10.
Momentum runs that party like the ERG runs the Tory party currently. And actually, the ERG, I think, actually picked that up from Momentum.
Yeah, no, but it's very possible because Momentum did all that stuff before the ERG was really a political force.
Hence why Corbyn won't come out and just state either side of the fence, because we know that Corbyn's a Brexiteer. We know that he's just part of his normal kind of old school socialist ideology. He's anti-EU. But because of, Momentum got him into power, he can't fucking say where he stands.
No.
But, he's the quote-unquote principled man.
Oh, it's...
So he can't...
I think we're going to move on from this now, but just a final sort of word, if anybody wants to sort of see... There's a great clip of in the House of Commons when Boris Johnson gave his first speech, and right at the end he does the thing that all prime ministers do, is they call out the leader of the opposition, and the thing that he really drills home...
Do you mean his first speech as Prime Minister?
He has first speech as Prime Minister, in the Commons at least.
Yeah.
He really drilled down on the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was a Eurosceptic all his life, and now he is heading the Remain... he's the spearhead of the Remain campaign, as it were, within, or at least the second referendum campaign.
No, he's not even that clear. Come on.
Well, that's the argument that Johnson was making. I'm not making that point, but Johnson was making this point, and the look on Jeremy Corbyn's face when Johnson said that, he looked like he was close to tears because there is an element of truth in that. It's obviously hyperbolic because it's politics, but he knows that he doesn't like the EU, and yet he is at least trying to be to his constituents looking like he is a Remain candidate at this point.
Boris is very good at gauging both his voter base and constituents. So that was a good move on his behalf, but for the most part he's kind of bollocks. The reality is he's not being clear on his position at all.
No, he's not, but it's definitely...
If he'd come out on the side of Remain, at least it's a position. So as Tom said, we're going to move on from this just because, this has been a story that's been around for about a week or so, and in all honesty, can't really go anywhere because no one's going to allow Corbyn to just all of a sudden become Prime Minister if, in the unlikely event that Johnson loses a no confidence vote. An interesting thing that happened this week, and I've only just read articles and just seen the headlines. I haven't actually seen any footage or audio of it. Trump has accused Jewish Americans who vote Democrat of basically being disloyal. Can I ask, disloyal to what?
That is the question, because as with a lot of Trump's tweets and Trump's statements that he makes at his rallies, it's not really clear what he's saying, which is probably a deliberate tactic so he can walk it back if he doesn't.
I think we know what he's saying, which is he's saying he's the most pro-Jewish president. So far, at least in this decade.
Yes, and I would argue that he does have some clout to back that up with the fact that he moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. He's been very, very supportive of Bibi Netanyahu.
I believe is bollocks. Actually, I don't believe. Obviously, of course, he's done some pro hardline Jewish things, as you said, which you're going into. He moved the American embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, and recognised Jerusalem as the actual capital of Israel, as anyone probably can imagine. That's pretty fucking provocative.
Yes, as both sides of that debate do claim that city as their own.
But in all honesty, every kind of quote unquote pro-Jewish movement that Trump has made is really just movements to appeal to his kind of right-wing base.
Oh, definitely.
Because in the last few years, with obviously the proliferation of Islamist terrorist attacks across the West, there's been this very much, the right has gone to really now come to love Jews in Israel, which, I mean, look, Israel is under attack from its neighbours all the time. It has an issue with terrorists constantly targeting it, but it's this weird kind of flag waving, and I suppose it's a virtual signalling in a sense of just all of a sudden being in love with Jews in Israel just because you're using it as this weird shield against Islam.
Yeah, I think it's
a weird statement against Islam.
It's a way to condemn the actions of people that they don't like for not the reasons that they're doing the actions, but it's just very politically expedient on the right at the moment to be very pro-Israel. I think there is a natural alignment and a softening, because the sort of classic anti-Semitism, which would generally come from the right in America, has... It's gone down on the mainstream right, whilst it is unfortunately rising in the sort of alt-right domain.
It never went away on what you'd call the far right, because you've got to remember the alt-right is just a younger far right.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's never gone away.
Coverage, or better PR, I should say.
It's definitely never gone away, but the fact that from the kind of relatively moderate and reactionary right up until what you'd call the alt-right, so the new kind of figureheads of the alt-right movement who are a bit more palatable and a bit more mainstream, now have this all of a sudden love for Israel. For example, there was a far-right march going through London a few months ago. I think it was one of the Tommy Robinson ones, and I sat and watched a live stream online because I was just interested to see what happened. And amongst the right-wing protesters, you see... there's all the usual kind of, EDL drunks, skinhead thugs. And then there's this little hipster kid, nipsters as people call them, Nazi hipsters, which is really, it's just a nerdy kid who's of the alt-right, in like a tie-dye t-shirt and like a 5-panel hat with an Israel flag. And walking amongst the right wing. And you actually see, I take it the footage was being recorded by a kind of traditional old right, kind of far right British guy, and he goes on camera, he goes, "Take that fucking flag down."
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well,
someone get that flag down, something like that.
It's crazy. There's that sort of inter-battle whether the far right can decide whether they like Israel or not. But there's a sort of a couple of layers of irony and hypocrisy on the Trump statements.
Yeah.
For the reason that he had said something very similar to what Rashid Tlaib, who is one of the members of the Squad, as they're known in America, had said. And the media coverage of what Trump had said and what Rashid Tlaib had said has been very different, whereas people have been, quite rightfully, very critical of Trump's statements, whereas it kind of disappeared into the ether, apart from on right-wing media in America.
Which, by the way, what Tlaib said was absolutely abhorrent.
Yeah, it was. And she just didn't call out Jews, she called out disloyal black people and disloyal gay people as well. She basically said, if you're not supportive of black and brown people of our cause, which for that she means intersectional, very far left politics, very far left for America at least, then we don't want you in our side, which is a step away from calling somebody an Uncle Tom, effectively. It's a horrible thing to say.
I mean, I've seen it amongst the left myself, the hard left, not the moderate left, that anyone who may be of a different kind of ethnic background, they might be black, they might be brown, if they're not of the hard left, they're Uncle Toms, they're traitors. Yeah. And normally it'd be white people saying that.
Yeah, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
It's the last thing that, particularly as somebody on the sort of, as a white conservative, I would just never go near anything like that with a 10-foot barge pole, because it's just something that you don't judge people based on their race. You judge people based on what they actually believe.
A great example of this is the both radio host and leader and founder of the Quilliam Foundation, Majid Nawaz.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people from the hard left who hate him.
Yeah.
They hate him, and why do you hate him? Oh, he's an Uncle Tom. He's he hates his own kind. And all Majid Nawaz is, he's an anti-extremism.
Yeah, he's an anti-extremism
activist.
He's a left-leaning classical liberal,
yes.
effectively.
He calls himself of the left. He's a moderate left. He's of the moderate left. He's an anti-racism. He's an anti-racism activist.
William do extremism, both extremism on the right and of the
Islamic kind, the jihadist kind. He's an anti-racism campaigner. He's an anti-extremism campaigner. All he does, he calls out quite dangerous conservative views within all different communities, whether it be from old white communities, whether it be from his community, which is the Pakistan's kind of Muslim community, Pakistani Muslim community, whether it be from the Hindu community, the Hindu community. He's just generally an anti-extremism and anti-conservative activist.
And he knows because he's been there, as it were. He is a self-confessed reformed extremist. He was plotting a coup in Egypt and founded Islamist organisations in different countries. I'm just remembering that from his book.
I think we're just going to continue with this, Fred, because in all honesty, we're going to talk about the G7 for 5 minutes, but fuck it, I don't care.
No, we were basically going to say that there's not a lot that we can say about that because it's all backroom deals anyway.
So just carrying on with this Majid Nawaz, Fred, he's an interesting figure in that sense because he's gone from being part of an organisation that believes in... They weren't violent jihadists, but they were in it. They were definitely Islamist.
It was Hizbut al-Tahrir.
That's it.
Yeah.
They basically their goal is to come to power, bring a Islamist authoritarian government to power via military coups.
Yes. So they're sort of in between jihadists and the Muslim Brotherhood, where the Muslim Brotherhood want to come to power through
there's quite a few major powers in the Middle East, i.e. Egypt, Turkey, that have coups about every 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's not a hard thing to do in reality. It is hard, it's complicated, but it's something you could achieve if there's enough of you.
It's not like saying we want to cause a communist coup by getting in front of the British or American army. That would be a very tall order.
Yeah, Egypt has coups all the time. Like the last one, which was against the Muslim Brotherhood, which was just, a year after the coup before.
The Muslim Brotherhood won the election, and then the army decided that they didn't like the politics of the Muslim Brotherhood, so they went basically back to a military dictatorship with a different person at the head.
Yeah.
And then I believe they actually released the former military dictator.
Hosni Mubarak's fall was basically him giving up over the pressure from the Egyptian side of the Arab Spring, and then him being taken by the government, by Sisi's military sort of government into prison, and then basically via democratic elections the Muslim Brotherhood winning, and then Sisi going, oh no, we can't have this democracy thing.
You voted for the wrong people. Which is sort of like, obviously not a big fan of a Muslim Brotherhood, but they won the bloody vote. So what can you do?
I don't like the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't like not just Islamist governments. I don't like authoritarian religious governments of any stripe, but they won the fucking election.
Yeah. And until they lose an election, they should be the ones who are running the country.
I don't like the Brexit Party. I would accept the Brexit Party becoming winning the UK election. I just realised we're running late, and we're going to cover, just for a bit of fun, just to get us away from current events at the moment, even though it's kind of a current events issue. We want to talk about the current events surrounding Frank Field. Frank Field is, to me, a very interesting, fascinating figure in British politics. So Frank Field, for anyone who doesn't know, he was a Labour kind of somewhat hardline politician who was a backbencher for decades, until he became part of the Labour government under Blair in 1997.
He's the MP for Birkenhead.
He's the MP for Birkenhead, and he's been the MP for Birkenhead since 1979.
It's a very, very safe Labour seat. It is, I looked it up.
Yeah.
He's been Labour since the 1910s.
Yeah, so what was kind of confusing me there, it's a safe Labour seat, but it's not it wasn't comfortably pro-Remain.
No, it actually got 51.8%, the exact average for Leave for that, which is basically means there are a lot of Labour supporters who are pro-Leave in this constituency.
Which is pretty standard for the North. We don't need to tell anyone that. Yeah. And what's funny about Birkenhead is it's for Cheshire, which is actually a pretty wealthy county, particularly for the North West. Birkenhead's pretty deprived. So, I mean, it makes sense as to why there's a Labour MP there, because, you know, Cheshire is normally a pretty blue county. But, so, like I said, Frankfield, interesting character. Just to start it off, as a student back in the 60s in university, he actually left the Conservative Party over the Conservative Party's at least lack of action against the apartheid government in South Africa.
Lukewarm reception would be generous, I would say.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party's attitude at that time. It is definitely a blot on the Conservative Party record, that tacit, implicit support.
So, Field, basically, that's when he started his career with the Labour Party. As we said, he became MP for Birkenhead in 1979. I suppose, as Tom said, it's a relatively safe seat. And it's quite a radical seat as well. It's very kind of... It's pretty socialist, but that's the North for you traditionally, though.
Yeah.
And Frank Field is an interesting character, and this is why. He doesn't belong in the Labour Party in any way. I suppose that's evident of the fact he was originally in the Conservative Party. But he's way more hardline socially, economically, and socially and economically than anyone in the ERG. Yes, he's pro-Brexit.
He actually did vote for the Theresa May withdrawal agreement in January,
which is kind of one of those weird things that Frank Field kind of surprises you with. He does one of these, relatively moderate acts.
Yes. And I believe he abstained on the motion against No Deal as well, which made the Labour whip, which is, I think he was an independent MP at the time, but it's still one of those things where 99% of the time he's going to vote with against the government, apart from when it comes to Brexit.
So, but he believes, basically, he's very socially conservative, he's quite a hardcore Christian, doesn't believe in gay marriage, he's part of some think tank that he's part of a socially conservative and Christian think tank, which is interesting. And also he actually just give you some background. So when he became part of the Labour government in 1997, he actually openly said he doesn't really believe in the state's involvement. He doesn't really believe in essentially state welfare. He doesn't believe in the state basically helping out with essentially benefits. But he's pretty hardline. I would say he's a libertarian, but reality is he's actually very much a protectionist.
Yeah, which is it's quite odd considering that he was the actual Minister for Welfare Reform at the start of the Blair government. He only lasted a year in that job, though.
Yeah, there you go. He essentially was. What was I going to say? He essentially became the as Tom said, he became the Minister for Welfare Reform. Even though he said he doesn't really believe in welfare, he doesn't believe in the welfare state. He didn't believe in, as he put it, the state's involvement in helping people, in basically in funding people's lifestyle.
Which for a Labour MP is very strange.
That's a big step.
Yeah, it's almost very... You've got to admire his balls just for coming out and saying that,
so
really.
You'd probably sit there and say, okay, so he's relatively libertarian. He's kind of an American libertarian. And then, but within the same year, very much he's caused that he pushed Brown through... he pushed on Brown. Brown was the Chancellor at the time, under Blair. He pushed through the minimum wage, which is absolutely not libertarian.
No, not in the slightest. But it's also not the state having to foot the bill for it, because it's forcing companies to fit the bill for it. And just a sort of reminder for anyone out there, we were quite late adapters of the minimum wage on an international
for Europe,
stage. Yeah. Yes, I believe the federal minimum wage in America is a lot lower than ours, but they do have state minimum wages over there as well, which vary. Obviously, they're higher in the blue states than they are in the red states.
So, like I said, he's kind of anti-welfare state, but yet he believed in, well, he pushed, it was his cause, was the Minimum Wage Act of 97, yet, or maybe it was 99, no, it was 97, so yet he... as Tom said, that's probably an ideological thing. He believed in the companies that the lower paid workers were working for, basically paying their workers a working wage or a living wage, as opposed to the government topping that up.
Yeah, which is, I would say it's not something that I would sort of align with, but I can see the ideological logic that he has on that.
Yeah.
And he's actually stuck with that.
So two positions that on the surface seem like they're juxtapositioned, but yet at the same time they kind of work out together. Later on down the line, as he left government, became a sort of backbencher again. He openly stated he was anti-EU, he was pro-Leave, which, by the way, for anyone who's kind of young, that's not that unusual for older members of the Labour Party.
Yes. Hilary Benn was famously very Tony Benn.
Hilary Benn was the son, I think, is actually relatively pro-Remain.
Yes, yeah, he was. There's a lot of positions there where he switched on, particularly when it came to war. But yeah, it's one of those things that if you listen to Jeremy Corbyn, there's a speech going around on YouTube in 2009, I believe it was, when when Ireland were voting for the second time for the EU treaty, and Jeremy Corbyn was very, very adamant that they should vote against this EU treaty. And honestly, if you'd read the transcript, you would have thought Nigel Farage was saying these things. He called it a European empire. He said it was undemocratic. He said that England should be always independent. It honestly looked like or sounded like a Nigel Farage speech that Jeremy Corbyn was saying. Which, and again, Frank Fields seems to be of that mould.
So what we were saying about Frank Fields and being pro-Leave, as you just mentioned, it's not unusual, particularly for backbench and older members of the Labour Party, particularly more harder left members. But also, this is very unusual for a Labour member of Parliament. His main reason given was because he was anti-EU immigration. He gives the usual kind of hardline, basically UKIP kind of reasons, which is EU immigration might stifle British workers' wages.
And it's just one of those things where you can tell he really genuinely does have UK workers, and workers in particular, at everything at the heart of what he's doing when it comes to minimum wage, when it comes to Europe. He is looking out for the workers as he sees it, which is sort of leads us on to the current events, as it were, the latest stuff that's happened this week.
Yeah, exactly. So why are we talking about Frank Field? So Frank Field, earlier this year, was... he gave up his post. When he gave up his post, he's still MP for Berkhamsted, yet he left the Labour Party.
Yes.
All suspicion will be because, as we know, Momentum are currently on a purge of the Labour Party. Normally, it's with moderate politicians, but they're very anti-Field. One, because Field is pro-Remain, and two, because he starts his own immigration.
Yeah.
Momentum's an odd organisation because at their head, they're made up of very old-school left-wing hardliners who would naturally be pro-Leave, but yet the body is made up of more younger Labour members who don't really have an economic policy and yet are just about social justice. I suppose you could say they're kind of intersectional.
Yes, I think intersectional sort of woke politics.
So Momentum kind of has to go on that basis. Yeah. So Momentum's pro-Remain by proxy, and it started purging the moderates just because it was harder left and it believed in Corbyn. And it wants MPs that can later vote in Corbyn,
It's been doing this with councillors for a few years now, and it's started to move on to the MPs as the election season seems to edge up.
The suspicion and the word on the street was the kind of Momentum infiltration of the local Berkhamsted Labour Party was there, and he was going to be purged and deselected. So. The reality was he jumped ship before he was deselected. Yeah. So he gets to keep his seat as member of Parliament of Birkenhead. He's now formed this week a new party called the
Birkenhead Social Justice Party.
Which is hilarious.
Yes, as you've sort of you've been listening for the last 10 minutes, you realise that the sort of woke social justice doesn't really go into the Frank Fields mentality.
No.
And it's going to be interesting because I don't think that a lot of the traditional voters that he has courted over the last years would align themselves with social justice, as it were.
No, I mean, look, you don't need to be an expert to figure this out. The reality is, with current politics as it is in regards to the partisanal edge, most people who believe in who are kind of pushing social justice, so to speak, are generally of the kind of the left.
Yes.
Which is fine. But they're generally of the younger left, the slightly more moderate. They might claim to be harder left, but in reality, they don't really have economic policies, so they're not really hard left. They're just intersectional.
Yes, and if they do sort of say social justice as an economic policy, all they seem to be doing is slapping a new Labour on socialist policies.
Yeah.
Which is you can find sort of be open about those policies, but don't call it anything else what it actually is.
And so.
Sorry about that. That is
so basically, that's the timer to say we've gone over an hour. We've reached the hour point, but we're going to carry on for a few minutes because we are running late. But Field is he's basically the social justice party of Berkhamsted. Generally, people who vote for Brexit are turned off by the word social justice.
Yeah. They're not people that would ever vote for the Tory party, but they are people who would stay home and not vote for the Labour Party if they keep pushing the woke narrative. I think that can be even more seen in Australia recently with the Australian election, where there was a very, very woke candidate for the Australian Labour Party who was very green and very into the social justice issues, and the turnout was a lot lower than they were expected because the traditional Labour voters, particularly the Pacific Islanders, just weren't
interested.
Which is something that you've really got to read the room and read the actual voters and not just read what's on Twitter, because that does seem to be a hole that many parties in the West, in the sort of Anglosphere, are falling into at the moment, which is they're looking at Twitter and thinking, oh, Boris Johnson's really unpopular, Brexit's really unpopular, Trump's really unpopular. But if you actually go out and talk to people, it is a different story. And don't count your chickens before they voted.
And so the point we're making here is, I'm really interested to see what happens in the next, particularly by the next election, if there is no by-election within the constituency. You're going to see Frank Field's currently, ruling party go up in an election against whoever currently then will be either leading the Brexit party or be not leading but will be currently standing for the Brexit party, or who will be standing for the Conservative or Labour party. I don't see Field's party winning.
No, I don't. I think there's going to be a split vote between the Brexit party and the Labour party. Because anyone who's pro-Brexit, which is about just over half the constituency, is either going to vote for Fields or they're going to vote for the Brexit party, which leaves the door wide open, I would say, for whoever runs as the Labour Party candidate. And they'll put someone strong in that because it's traditionally a strong seat. I think that Labour will probably regain that seat when it comes to it. But that, on a pure mathematical level, but I may be underestimating Frank Field's popularity in the constituency.
Yeah, he might be a popular MP, but I don't think he's popular enough to... This is my opinion, I don't think he's popular enough to, particularly in that part of the world, to have dropped the Labour monarch, sort of the Labour marquee, and yet still win there. I don't think he's popular enough there. I think it's just a Labour constituency, and that's what's going to happen.
No, I think we're in agreement on that one. It's just the numbers do not look good for him. He probably knows that. He's probably just trying to go out with a little bit of honour and saying, I'm going to fight for what I'm fighting for. I mean, the man's 78 years old.
The man's got to give up soon. And I don't know. We're going to basically watch what happens, at least over the next... It could be next few months, whenever the next general... I'm guessing the next general election's in the next few months.
It will either be just before Brexit Day or just after Brexit Day. I can't see there not being one by the end of the year. And if there is another one by the end of the year, it'll be very early next year.
So whatever happens to Field will be interesting in that next election, just because Field is somewhat of a juggernaut in the Labour Party, or was a juggernaut in the Labour Party, but he became very isolated in the later years, and particularly as Corbyn came to power, because generally you had this weird backbench group made up of Corbyn, Field, McDonnell and Abbott, and they've kind of been together for years, yet he kind of got squeezed out.
Yeah,
because momentum rules supreme.
Yeah, and he wasn't willing to compromise on his Eurosceptic principles, whereas the other three were, effectively.
Yeah. So I've actually named this episode Uncle Frank Hates You. It's just named after the hypothetical book I've wanted to write for years about Frank Field, called Uncle Frank Hates You. Just because I find him such a fascinating figure in British politics, and I kind of would miss him if he loses the next if he loses his constituency in the next general election, just because it means he's no longer a backbencher. He's been, I suppose he has to retire at some point, but he's gone, and he's no longer rabble rousing on the backbenches. Again, I'm no Labour voter. It was just always fun to see, and I kind of always liked taking the piss out of him because he just never made any sense.
It will be one that will be studied by politics professors for a long time to come, whatever happens in the next general election.
Because everyone fails to understand him, because he left the Conservative Party due to socially liberal reasons, yet joined the Labour Party as an absolute social conservative.
Yeah, he's an odd character, but one that does seem to have at least stuck by his principles. Despite that meaning him risking not getting back into Parliament, and by the looks of a sort of dates, or at least losing his only chance to be in the cabinet.
And by the way, if you think back to when he left the Conservative Party, which was the 60s, Labour was not a liberal party; it was a hardline socialist party. We people on the right now have this thing where it comes from America, where they refer to anyone on the left as being liberal. The UK doesn't have the UK's left-wing tradition is not liberal.
No.
So using those terms to explain UK left-wingism is wrong, because away from New Labour, which I suppose technically wasn't even, it was kind of left-wing, it was moderate left-wing, the UK's left tradition is not traditionally liberal.
No, not in the sense of we in this
like
country.
America.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is an unfortunate term, but effectively the American political zeitgeist has butchered the term liberal as we had known it, and effectively turned it into a synonym for left wing, which it really shouldn't be, because it does mean actually something specific and with a lot of philosophical backing going all the way back to John Stuart Mill, really.
Yeah. So I think we're going to end it there, because we've gone a little bit over what we thought we would. It's been a fun week again. It's kind of been interesting going back to just doing the current affairs thing. I hope we have a bit more of an interesting week coming up in politics.
It is the summertime, so it might be a little bit dull, but we'll hope for a outrageous Trump tweet or whatever. That seems to be the main thing that happens in the summer these days.
Any closing thoughts, though?
No, I think we've covered quite a lot, and let's just hope that if he is going to go soon, that Frank Field gives us a few memorable things in his last few months.
Cool. So that's bye from Tom, and from me, goodbye, and remember, Uncle Frank hates you.